Hey, I'm Cameron McKenzie. I'm the editor-in-chief over at theserverside.com, and you can always follow me on Twitter at CameronMCNZ. Right now, I wanted to talk to you about the git stash. I wanted to talk to you about how you can use the git stash list command along with a couple of other complementary git stash commands as well, so that you can go and inspect your git stash, see what's in there, show what the files are, maybe even take a look at the difference between certain files, and maybe even delete it as well. But here's how you can list your git stash. Now I've got a little Git repository here, and this Git repository has a rich history to it. I'm going to open the Git bash shell in this particular folder. You can see that's where I am. And I'm going to take a look at the history of stashes. I'm going to say git stash list. That gives me a list of all the different stash entries. And you can see here there were 2 stash entries on this commit, 2 stash entries on that commit, 2 on this commit. Looks like there was 2 per commit for a while. Actually, this one looks like it's got 3. There's 1 on this one, and there's 1 on that one. If you want to see a little bit more detail, you can always do git stash list all. And you can see where the head pointer was, where it was on a particular commit, and when the stash entry came in when compared to that commit. So that's kind of interesting. If you've got a lot of stash entries, you can parse them out. You can say, hey, I only want to see 3 at a time. So you can do git stash list -3, and that'll just show you the latest 3. You can even do date stuff. So if I want to say, hey, I want to see git stash list and see everything before 5 days ago, you can see that. And of course, I only did this repository a moment ago, so there's nothing before 5 days ago. But if I do the opposite and I say, well, show me everything after 5 days ago, then I should see all of my commits. And you can do a date range in there as well, which is pretty cool. If you want to see a summary of changes for each element, you can use the stat command. And so here we see the changes per file in each of the different stash entries. It's similar whenever you see stat, often you see people using the -p, the patch command, so we can use that as well. And that gives us the diff of changes on each of the stashes. I'm going to get out of there. So there's certainly a lot of ways that you can go in and take a look at, what changed from one stash to another. There's also git stash list one line, which looks fairly pretty. That kind of looks like your default reflog rendering. But as you can see, there's a number of different ways to go in here and just take a look at your git stash history. And the key is this git stash list command. Now say you actually want to go into a particular stash. You want to actually see what's inside there. We can always do git stash show. And this will tell you what has changed in that last git stash that you have sitting there in your git stash history. Of course, you might want to dig into particular ones. You can always say git stash show and then say, I actually want to show, show the patch for stash at, what was an interesting one? Maybe stash at 2. Okay, looks like a couple of entries were made there for 2. You can see the content that was added to that file, style.css. So a couple of interesting changes there. And even to say get the difference between what you've got in your stash and maybe what you've got in the head of the master branch, you can use the git diff as well. So I can say git diff stash at two. And now you can see the difference in changes from git stash 2, which was done a long time ago, and what's actually in the head on that master branch. So you can compare what's in the stash to what's in the master branch. Now if you want to git stash list. If you want to pull a stash into your local machine, well, it's just git stash pop, and that will pop the latest changes in. Of course, sometimes you may actually run into a conflict. And if you run into a conflict, what you can do is, instead of trying to resolve the conflict and merge your files together, you can actually just create a brand new branch with the stash on it. So it's like an independent branch with all of those files associated with that stash on that branch. And then you can work with those files, and then maybe at a later point in time, actually merge them into the master branch, merge them into your feature branch. And so this is pretty cool. You just go git stash branch, and then my topic branch. And so you do git stash branch. You want to create a branch. You're going to call it my topic branch, and then you specify the stash that you want. So I'll take stash 5. And you can see here, we're now on my topic branch. If I do the ls command, looks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, well, I don't have a huge number of changes right there, but you can see that this is actually taking the files associated with that particular stash, created a new branch, and put me on it, which is pretty cool. Now, if there's a particular stash that you don't want, you can always remove it, and you do that with the git stash drop command. And so I had 8 stashes before, and I'm down to 7 now. So you can see 8 up here, 7 now. And the drop will just get rid of the most recent stash. However, you can use the stash naming convention stash at 5 and delete any branch in your git, any stash in your git stash history. And then finally, if you're really tired of all these stashes, you can get rid of them. You just do git stash clear. Now you can't back out of this, so once you've done it, you're done. But if I do git stash list right now, after the git stash clear, everything is gone. And there you go. That's how you can manage your git stash history with git stash list, git stash show, git diff, and a few other commands like drop, clear, pop, and apply. And there you go. That's how the git stash list command works. If you enjoyed this tutorial, head over to the serverside.com. I got lots of Git, GitHub, DevOps, and enterprise software development tutorials and articles on the site. You can always follow me on Twitter at CameronMCNZ, and I'd say, hey, why not even subscribe on YouTube?